Welcome to Under the Fig Tree podcast. In today's episode, hosts Reverend Micah Glenn and Reverend Dr. Ben Haupt talk theology and life as they meditate under the fig tree.
What's up? Welcome back to another episode of Under the Fig Tree. I'm your host, Reverend Micah Glenn, Director of Recruitment here at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, as always, joined by my highly esteemed boss, co-worker, and other host, co-host, joint host of Under the Fig Tree.
The esteemed part is relative, right?
Reverend Dr. Ben Haupt. You gotta let me say your whole name first.
I know. I'm just like, all right, cut this off. Yeah, I'm just in a philosophical mood today.
Are you?
Yeah. I think esteemed is relative. It's relative to whether or not people esteem me.
Oh, yeah, but as I'm the one introducing you, I esteem you.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
there you go.
So that's really all that matters in the scope of the universe. Chew on that for a little while. But we're joined by one of our students here at the seminary, Lucas Frauenhoff. I almost called you Reverend. I almost called you Doctor. If I had, it is what it is. We'd have to award you both.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Good to have you on, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And so, Luke, you're currently a second-year seminary.
That's correct.
Yeah. So how has life at CSL been for a year and some months?
It's been busy, to say the least. Especially now here in second year, it really starts to ramp up, and we've already had a few vicarage meetings, and we're really starting to think about, okay, where we want to go and what kind of ministry we're looking at, and it's hard to believe that that day in April is just right around the corner.
And you're the social cultural chair for the seminary, Student Government Association. So we're gonna talk all things social cultural today on the seminary campus. So we'll get to that. That kind of encompasses life outside the classroom. Fun. You're the organizer of fun.
Right. Party planning committee.
Party planning committee.
I like to say.
You are meeting the seminary's party planning committee in person. That's good. Well, we'll get to that a little bit later. We also need to talk about your name. I asked if he knew what his last name meant right before we started. Frauenhoff. Hof is a home, or a Bauernhof is the farmer's homestead. So Hof kind of is, it's not quite house. Hof is like the barnyard, the whole like estate, okay. a whole place. And Frauen, that's just plural for women. So where in the world did this name come from? Any ideas?
I have no idea. We've been over on this side of the ocean for quite a few generations already, so most of the German's been removed.
Home for the women. I don't know. Maybe your family welcomed in women at some point, widows, something like this, or I don't know. Maybe your great-great-grandfather was just a ladies' man, and and you just became the Frauenhofs, the place for the ladies. All right. We should probably move on.
That's the story I would stick with. So, Luke, just tell us in our audience a little bit about yourself. What were you doing? Where you come from before you headed to CSL?
Sure. So I born and raised Northern Illinois, just outside of Chicago, out in Aurora.
Oh, sure.
Not too far from CUC. We used to have state track meets there for Lutheran Schools Association.
Okay.
My 8th grade year, I was 0.3 of a second off in qualifying for state in the 100-meter dash.
Whoa.
That was quite a few years ago and quite a few pounds ago. Grew up out in the suburbs, out in Aurora, St. Paul, Aurora. Family's been there for quite a few generations already. Went to Lutheran grade school, preschool all the way up through 8th grade, and then went to public high school, West Aurora High School. Mm-hmm. Played tennis there for 3 years, and then was scheduled to kind of play in college, but an injury kind of prevented that. So still kind of all these years later, just kind of working through all that and realizing that I'm not 18 anymore, and there are certain things I can and can't do because of the injury. So
Who was your pastor at St. Paul's Aurora?
So growing up, that was Pastor Jack Ficken.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I
His
thought.
youngest, Alex, was actually a year ahead of me.
Okay.
And then he left for, I believe it was LCEF
Right.
before PLI, the year before I got confirmed.
Okay. Nice.
So it's been quite a few years since I've seen many of the Fickens, but it's always good to catch up with them when I can.
I saw them this past weekend. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Good people.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, where'd you end up going to college?
So I did my undergrad at the University of Wisconsin La Crosse.
Okay.
Which is, La Crosse is right on the Mississippi River. And if you look, you can actually see Minnesota. That is one of the smaller campuses in part of the UW system. I say smaller, there are maybe 10,000 of us on campus.
Sure.
Compared to Madison, it's much smaller.
It's all relative.
Probably a lot of Lutherans, though. My pastor's daughter just started at UW La Crosse.
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few Lutheran churches within the area. There were quite a few Welsh churches in the area as well. La Crosse is kind of a more progressive town. I think there were maybe, in the college Bible study I attended, there were maybe 10 of us that attended regularly.
Okay.
And Faith Lutheran was like 2 or 3 blocks from campus, so it was within walking distance. We never had to worry about trying to get over there. And
Sure.
And of course, you went every Sunday.
we tried. We did not make it to the 8 o'clock service very often. We usually went to 10:30.
You're doing it right. I'm sorry, and I don't want to trigger anybody further than I already have. But 8 o'clock is just too early for church,
Amen.
man.
Amen. I had to preach at the 8:15 service.
It is hard, man.
At a church this
It is
Sunday.
hard.
Whew. That was early. I'm usually just still having my coffee and waking up at 8:15.
Exactly. I'm trying to get David out of bed and dressed at that time of the day.
This explains a lot, though, because I actually thought that you were from Wisconsin, and I thought that I picked up a little hint of that in your accent. You sounded like you're from Wisconsin. So maybe these were really formative years where you were up at college.
And my mom's side of the family is from Wisconsin, so
Okay.
she grew up in the Eau Claire area, which is just about 90 minutes north of La Crosse. So I was able to go visit family quite a
nice.
bit. Family of 8, dairy farm families. So most of her brothers and sisters stayed within the area. I actually didn't notice it until I came back home after college, how much just being there for like maybe 2 or 3 months, just how much it finally came out.
Do you call the drinking fountain a bubbler?
I do not. So that's more of an east side of the state thing.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like Milwaukee, Green Bay
Right.
area.
That's where I went to school.
I think this is the first time I've ever heard a water fountain called a bubbler.
They call it a bubbler. I was like, what?
Okay.
There are no bubbles. There's no bubbles.
Oh, and the story I got was when Kohler was started to design this, their first product actually bubbled.
Oh.
So that's how they came up with the term bubbler. Now, granted, this is probably all urban myth and legend, but
Right.
that was always the story I got.
Like Core, like the beer company?
Kohler.
Kohler.
So they do Saints.
Oh, like
and-
K.
You're thinking of Coors.
Well, he's accents, right? I don't. Anyway. Oh, well, all right. Now that we've kind of gotten past accents and all that, Luke, if you wouldn't mind, if you would share your pathway to applying to seminary and becoming a student here, what was it like? Who encouraged you? Answer it however you want, but if you could just share with us and our listeners, how did you end up here?
Sure.
I want to hear about that, but really quick, I just have to ask one burning question.
Okay.
Do you know how to milk a cow?
I do not. My grandparents stopped farming long before I was born.
Got it.
I've been to a dairy farm and I milked a cow, but not by hand. We did electronic thing.
I mean,
that's
some
not
of
milking a cow.
the technology.
It got
these days
milk out of
is-
the cow, and I put the things on the udders, so I have milked a cow. I won't let you take that away from
The
me.
robot.
I
The
refuse.
robot did it.
No, but it couldn't do it autonomously. It needed me to connect it to the cow.
You know how to use a robot.
Apparently,
Good
I
job.
do. Yeah, to milk a cow. Anyway, all right. Your story of how you became a student.
This is how our podcast works.
So I'll kind of preface it with I had everything kind of gone the way I had planned it out in my head. I would have been out on vicarage right now.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in high school, years ago, I sat on a call committee to call St. Paul's senior pastor, just kind of as a representative of the youth, and just kind of make sure that our interests are represented, to make sure that we've got a pastor who's believes in that part of the ministry. And my youth director at the time, who's now a pastor, his first call was up in northern Minnesota, and then just took a call over to Athens, Wisconsin. He had told me, I kind of want you to think about church work. It's something I think you'd be good at. It's not necessarily something that I'm telling you have to pursue, but at least keep it in the back of your mind that you could be good at it. Mm-hmm. So I started looking at colleges, looked at a couple Concordias. CUC was way too close to home. Fair. Unfortunately. It's 45 minutes, and
I get it.
I still wasn't sold on church work as a vocation and as a career. So I started looking at other colleges where I wanted to go, what I wanted to major in. So my parents were in education their entire careers. Mom retired 1 year ago, after 33 years in teaching, and Dad retired probably about 3 or 4 years before that. Same thing, 34, 35 years, all in public education, all in the same district. Nice. Mom's last 20 years were all in the same building, teaching 2nd and 3rd grade. So,
God bless her.
Yes. So teaching was kind of the family business. I've got aunts and uncles who are teachers, and it was something I was considering at that point, but my mom and dad said, you don't want to do this. It's not the same as when we started 30 years ago. You're going to be dealing with a lot that we didn't have to deal with, and we don't think it's worth it. So as I started looking, like, all right, I'll major in business, kind of, get a good groundwork, and then, still be active in the church, not, as a full-time church worker, but, as a lay leader, serving on boards, helping with, committees, dinners, anything, what have you. So my undergrad is actually a double major in finance and marketing.
Oh, sure.
And at that point, when I was at La Crosse, the plan was to kind of lean more heavily on the finance side of things, kind of do like corporate finance, banking, stuff like that, where I could, I could still be that member on Sundays that's just there on Sundays, but, more importantly, at that point in time, be on the golf course by, noon on Fridays.
Sure. Yeah.
So that was my undergrad. Thankfully, I got that done in 4 years. That took a lot of work. My last semester was 4 capstones.
Wow. Because of the double major.
Because of the double major. So my finance capstone and then my marketing capstone was actually 2 classes. One of them was just kind of like a seminar, and then the other one was actually doing a research paper. And then there was a management capstone that all the business majors at UWL had to take as well. So it was 12 out of my 15 credits my last semester were all capstones, and writing all those fun papers and getting everything out of the way.
You could run businesses, it sounds like. Which is good.
I think so. Well, as you were talking about your story, a number of things came up. We can go from the back end and move forward and forget about some of the things that sparked at least some thoughts, or we can go backward. Which direction do you want to go?
You roll.
All right, cool. So when you were first starting to talk about your pathway, so I get asked quite often, what are some of the things that we should be saying or doing with our youth to get them and keep them engaged in the church for the sake of helping the conversation to where, in conversation, vocatio isn't the only thing that they're invested in, right? Because it's not where they live. They're going to have to go back home. But you talked about being a high schooler on your call committee. Can you say more and say what it was like being a youth in the room with adults talking about who's going to be our next pastor, but then also how did that also shape or not shape you as part of the youth of your congregation?
Sure. So it was interesting for a lot of reasons. One being that I knew most of the people in the room, and they knew me since I was,
sure,
a little kid.
Which can be good or bad, depending
right,
on
and
the,
depending on the day. A lot of it, I mean, you try and keep up with it. You try and, at least for me personally, like I had to do, what they were talking about. Like, I got to look this up.
Sure.
Like I have no idea what they're talking about. But I think it's kind of one of those fight or flight moments where, I mean, you kind of have to know how to adapt to the room and actually, be presentable to the adults and, actually look like you belong, which was always a struggle because, again, most of the adults in the room have known me and my family since, long, long ago.
right.
It was interesting to say the least because it gave me a very good indication of what ministry shouldn't look like.
Oh.
I saw a lot of the politics and, without getting into it too much, there was the way kind of St. Paul transitioned into where they're at now. There was a lot of division, a lot of heartbreak, which, we're well past it now. But at that point in time, we're still kind of, well within, there's this sort of division. So it's trying to, kind of bridge that gap, I guess, of, yes, we want to move forward, but yes, we still have to deal with, what kind of happened in the past.
Yep.
So it kind of gave me a good idea of, and that was originally what sold me on not going in the church. Where okay, I don't want to deal with the church politics on a daily basis and have no reproof from it. But
Right.
it was an interesting. It was about 18 months, which was kind of on the short end. They were just vacant not too long ago, and their current pastor got there in 2021. That was after a 3-year vacancy.
Yeah, that's more and more the case these days.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why Under the Fig Tree podcast exists, is because we have a very clear pastoral shortage, and there are lots of congregations that are looking for pastors, and there just aren't enough of them. So you went through that whole call process. You learned about all these politics. You had to grow up or get out pretty quick.
Right.
Fight or flight, you said. So through all that, you decided to stay. How was that as far as a faith journey? What were the conversations that you were having with God? Like, is this what your church is really like?
And that was a big part of the conversations. And I remember having these conversations with my youth director after some of these meetings going, how do people do this for a career?
Yeah.
And how are they involved in this? I mean, it's because you're looking at it going, okay, some of the more secular stuff is getting in the way of sharing the gospel and sharing the good news.
Yeah,
Sure.
How do you sort of kind of bridge the gap and balance, what needs to be there for the good order, but also, let's preach the gospel in a way that's most effective, which
Right.
may or may not agree with the secular.
right.
It was very, very challenging, and I think even when I got to college, I was kind of like, I really don't want any part of this. And I'm very thankful that I actually went to a Bible study at Faith. One of the first couple weeks I was there, Wednesday night, just had some pizza. I think we started going through the book of Matthew that first year. And just having that good sense of community again was what I was really missing. That kind of really brought me back to seeing what good can come out of the church.
Wow.
And actually, out of that Bible study, there are now 2 pastors who are out in the field, and then me, who will be out on vicarage here in a few short months.
That's awesome, because I would guess that just about every Christian, if they've spent a long enough time in the church and long enough time in some kind of leadership in the church, they'll experience some part of the not so sanctified, not yet
Right.
very holy part of Jesus' church, and yet you didn't just leave out the back door. I heard a term recently. We know about the nuns, the people that mark none on their religious preference. The term that I heard is duns.
Oh,
Have you heard this? People that are just done with church, the duns. I hear more and more people that they're just done. Church got too political, church got too complicated, they got hurt in some way, and they just kind of wrote it off and was like, I'm done. And you didn't do that. You hung in there, just gave it time. Jesus shows up in this Bible study in Matthew.
It all works out.
And you found some community. And so that was for you was that the turning point where it was like, oh, there's something really good about being connected to a local congregation?
It was one of them, yeah. Pastor Paul Mundinger, who was at Faith when we were there, actually brought in an admissions counselor from Fort Wayne to talk to our Bible study about, careers in church work. And that kind of sparked it a little bit. I'm like, okay, I can, kind of see this. But, I always came up with some dumb excuse like, I don't have the gift of public speaking. I'm not one to, be up front and kind of be the center of attention. I really don't want to deal with the politics again. And, my theological knowledge at that point just wasn't what I think a pastor should be. Just excuse after excuse of, not wanting to go into the ministry and not, truly following, the calling to head into the ministry. So that was kind of one of those turning points, was actually hearing from an admissions counselor at Fort Wayne.
Well, then also, just because, again, while we don't stress that, like, experience and things like that are things that we necessarily should trust, as in, like, my life experience, if I'm going through series after series of traumatic events and things like that, well, that in and of itself doesn't say I'm being punished by God or God doesn't care about me because I'm going through all this trauma, to use a hyperbolic illustration, but nonetheless, again, you go through a call process, which call process for all congregations are challenging. And if your pastor's been there for a long time or a short time, so I've been a vacancy pastor for a little over a year and a half now, and my vacancy is ending at the end of January, and I can already start to hear the appeals from people of, what does it mean that you won't be the pastor anymore? Does it mean you're going to disappear altogether? Will you still be around? Can I still call you? Where, again, no matter how long you're there, somebody's going to invest their spiritual care into your hands, right? And so that's a challenge. So politics aside, and the bureaucracy of it aside, the call process of staying or going, hard for everybody.
Yep.
But then you go to college or finance and marketing, reconnected. Was it just the visit from the admissions counselor from Fort Wayne and the Bible study, or what else was kind of going on that kind of also kind of just clicked? Because again, more and more students are coming from different places. They could be at a public university where church work isn't in front of them.
Right.
But what were some of those other things that were also helping, not necessarily even push you towards the seminary, but just your faith formation in college, because it's just a tough time.
A quick shout out to Fort Wayne for sending us
100%.
sending you our way. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
We have great relationships with the colleagues in Fort Wayne, where the whole team is going up, and we're going to hang out with our compatriots in Fort Wayne here in a couple weeks. But I'm glad that conversation. So all right, now you can answer Micah's question.
So kind of going on in the background, I would say just having just normal conversations with that pastor, either at church on Sunday or, at the Bible study on Wednesday, but we were also, we kind of made it a point to be involved in each other's lives outside of church and outside of Bible study.
Yeah.
Shout out to my buddy Rob, who I met my freshman year of college, lived across the hall from me. He's now a pastor up in just north of Milwaukee. Great guy. Stood up in his wedding a couple of years ago. We actually found out, and this is how small the Lutheran world is, my aunt had his mom as a student when my aunt and uncle were teaching up in Berlin, Wisconsin.
Small Lutheran church.
Sure is.
It is. But having that sense of community outside of church, being able to talk about some of the things that we were discussing either in Bible study or what we heard in a sermon on Sunday, made it a lot easier for me to say yes. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. Yes, having this faith again is what really is important. Just by that point, my grandpa was starting to have some issues with dementia and all that. But when I was going up there, their pastor up in that area was just phenomenal with the family. And I mean, I saw that level of care. I'm like, yes, this is exactly what we need in a pastor, or in any pastor, really. So just, again, that sense of community outside of the four walls of a church is what really kind of progressed it the way it did.
Yeah.
Nice. So you made this progression through. So did you come straight from undergrad to seminary?
I did not. So I was out in the real world for about 7 years.
Okay.
Before I got down here.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So
A little older than I thought you were, Luke.
Right.
I
Yeah.
get that a lot.
Compliment, yeah.
I get
Good for
that a
you.
lot.
Yeah.
Just turned
I
30.
knew you were mature, but I didn't know how old you were.
Just turned 30 this summer. So.
All right. So what'd you do
Welcome to the club.
7 years before you came to seminary?
So the summer after I graduated, I did an internship with a financial planning company in the suburbs of Chicago. I kind of figured that would be what I would do. I would build a financial practice. That's actually what my research paper and my marketing capstone was on, was kind of building a financial services practice. And at this point in time, social media was really starting to be on the up and up. So that was really the primary focus of, okay, we have these tools that are at our disposal. Let's go ahead and use them for our good. Did that for a summer. It was absolutely miserable. Kind of on a whim, I moved up to Madison, Wisconsin. A lot of my friends from college ended up settling in the area, either working with Epic Healthcare, which is a big employer in the area. They employ maybe 1,000 every 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Through hiring events and all that. Couple of guys I knew worked at UW Health, some of the big accounting firms. So it was kind of a good swath of experience there in Madison. And then I sat for my real estate exam, got my license, and primarily did real estate and property management. Those 7 years I was there, kind of focusing more on the property management side, just having the license if I needed it. Myself and a couple other coworkers were awfully close to getting our own firm started, but things just kind of fell through, and we all kind of went our separate ways. And then the last 2 years, I was in Madison. I kind of wound down the real estate practice side of things. At that point, we were kind of well into the pandemic, and I just I need a change, and I finally had enough. So I kind of transitioned over into kind of a working in the office at the church I was at, which was great because then I saw kind of that side of things for the ministry, but then also I was kind of there as we were getting the school started at the church I was at, and that was getting the school started and getting everything off the ground, having all the conversations, getting everything ready, all the approvals. That was a better part of 4 years of my life while I was in Madison. So as I probably wasn't there very long. I went home to St. Paul, Aurora, and at that point, their call committee had extended a call to a pastor who had just declined. And I knew this was going to be a tough one because they were really hoping for this pastor. Everyone thought he would have been a great fit for the church. So, I was home for, I think, Father's Day that weekend, and I stuck around after the 8 o'clock service. Much to my chagrin, I always had to go to 8 o'clock because...
Yep, me too.
Yep.
Growing up, always 8 o'clock.
Yep. Even as I got older.
No matter how late I was out, it was 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, and there's no other option.
Yep.
So I ended up talking to some really good family friends of ours who I had their daughter as a kindergarten and first grade teacher at St. Paul. And I just, asked them, how the process is going. I'd kind of heard that, they were kind of going through a declension of the call. I'm like, if you're at that point, I can start making some phone calls. I can start, seeing if some guys would be willing to be put on the list for you guys. So that way you at least have that, make it a little easier for you on the back end of things. And what they had kind of said was what really kind of got me down here. And, they had said, at this point, it was probably about 2 years into the vacancy. And they had said, it's been a trying time for the congregation. And I believe it. But they had said their vacancy pastor at the time had said, God may still be calling and training your next pastor. I'm like, all right, that wasn't really necessarily directed right at me, but I'm like, I can't really ignore that anymore. Like, all right.
Looking over your shoulder,
Right.
and there was nobody else that was.
It's time to listen.
Yeah.
So it was later that day. I ended up driving back up to Madison, which was about a 2.5-hour drive. That was probably the longest I've ever been in silence. No radio, no music, no podcast, no nothing. Just driving back, just thinking about what I just heard, and
Wow.
is this really what I should be doing? And I probably about a week later, I texted my mom and dad, and I go, hey, this is kind of the conversation I had last week while I was home. I'm thinking about this. What do you think? They're like, well, we thought you should have been there about 7 years ago, but we're here for it either way.
That's awesome.
Wow. It's a cool story. I really like the bit about the silence. This is a serious thing to come to seminary, to kind of hang up all the stuff that you train for in undergrad. And I'm sure that there were probably lots of other possible ways to develop your career, but here you are.
Well, and then one of the things that, as you were talking about your education, especially now with work experience behind it as well, to where, again, when I'm talking to, especially to high schoolers, not that I don't think theology is valuable or that it needs to be learned, but also you get a ton of it at the seminary anyway, that even now if you're going into a pre-seminary program, definitely do the languages. Minor in the languages. It's not going to hurt you. It's only going to benefit you and get you on your way faster. But then a major in theology, it's not a bad thing. And I think a lot of guys, if they've done a pre-seminary program, majored in theology there, when they get to seminary, they can progress their theological academic knowledge and skills beyond what the MDiv has in a variety of different ways, STM, PhD. But I majored in chemistry. I'm now in the PhD program. Eventually, especially what's necessary for the MDiv, we all catch up, whether you majored in theology in college or not. But having a business degree, not necessarily a chemistry degree, it's not like, well, or something else. I even say, do education, learn how to teach, and learn how to teach well. It's only going to help your preaching and your teaching in your parish. If not, you end up getting connected to a school. I try to tell guys to just diversify your education as much as you can in the space that we get in higher education. You're going to get 4 years typically for a bachelor's degree, 4 years typically here. The more skills and assets that you can acquire in that 8-year period is only going to benefit you. I mean, and hanging it up, when you get into a congregation, you're going to be able to provide invaluable knowledge, experience, and talents to how it operates. And they'll trust you because you have the credentials to back up what you're saying. And I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you're here at the seminary. You finished first year. You're in the fall semester of second year, third semester. So tell us a little bit about what seminary is like. I mentioned earlier that you serve as the social cultural chair, but maybe we should start with classes, because that is like the real reason that you're here, the important thing. Although social cultural is pretty important. But let's talk about classes first. So what are some of the classes that you've had, and in particular some that have been maybe influential or helpful?
Sure. So first year, first semester, it's a lot of introductory classes, intro to systematics, intro to historical theology, really learning, kind of the ins and outs of especially the church fathers. Interpreting and communicating the word was kind of your intro to hermeneutics. And then...
Which is basically just the study or the art of interpreting the Bible, right?
Right, yes. And then your exegetical paper for that class for my class was on the baptism of Jesus.
So talk us through, I don't think that we've ever talked about an exegetical paper on the podcast.
Sure.
So for a listener that's not been in an exegetical class, what is an exegetical study?
An exegetical study is quite a bit of work. I'm not going to lie.
That's a good definition. It's a lot of work.
Primarily what they want out of an exegetical paper is really you working with the original language. So right now I'm in Torah with Dr. Golden, and I kind of have to decide which passage I want to do from an exegetical paper.
So you get to pick?
Yes, you get to pick, and there's quite a few of them that you can pick from. And if it's not on the list, because I'm preaching on, or I'm writing a sermon for Thanksgiving, based on Psalm 67, and I had contemplated maybe just doing an exegetical paper on that, but I'm like, let's kind of diversify a little bit.
Wait, for Exodus and the Torah, Psalms is that not the class you said?
It's the sermon I'm writing is for worship in the Word. This semester.
Okay, sorry.
We have to write an occasional sermon, but Dr. Golden had said, if there's a passage that's not on this list,
I see. Yeah.
if you want to write an exegetical on it, we can talk about it. We can make it work. But I'm probably leaning towards doing one on Genesis 3 and on the fall.
Oh.
So really, what you want to do is you want to, have your ESV translation, and then really dive into the language, see if what nuances are kind of missed with translation choices that have been made. And
you might do a little textual criticism, look at the footnotes to see if there are any variants in the ancient manuscripts,
right,
to see the wording. Has it always been the same? Before we had printed Bibles, there were not as many controls on the language, but not everybody does textual criticism, just nerds like me. Keep going.
So once you've got that done, you sort of move into kind of a historical application to the text, where it fits in the greater narrative of the Bible, but then also kind of that little section where it fits in the narrative as well. Then moving on to kind of application, Scripture, interpreting Scripture. Where else do you see this passage in the Bible? But then also, is it mentioned or is it applied within the confessions?
Oh yeah.
That's kind of your second to last portion. Some profs will want you to sort of give a real life application to it. How would you preach on it? What would you kind of hit on, stuff like that. And then your last kind of section is, an exegetical statement. This, passage, X passage, is of what form, conveys what message, and this is, kind of the overall theme of this passage and kind of how it fits into the overall narrative and then story of everything and into a real life application.
That's good.
Yep.
So can you imagine that, prospective students? Can you imagine that sitting down and taking maybe 10 or 15 verses tops, something like that? Probably not even a chapter, right?
No.
We're talking like maybe 5 verses.
Right.
And how many pages are we talking?
Oh, it could be
like 10, 12?
They recommend it closer to 2,000 words. So 6 or 7 pages.
Okay. Yeah. So spending a couple of pages just on a couple of verses, kind of like, this is essentially what commentator writers are writing, is essentially commentary on a portion. So at seminary, you get to practice. What would it be like to write a commentary?
Right.
Now, whether or not anybody wants to read that commentary is a different story. For most of us as students.
But that work of like deep dive into the Bible,
processing the text,
probably deeper than you've ever been pushed to study just a few verses before. But that's part of what seminary is, so that technically you have all the skills that you could do that for every passage that you preach and teach on. Not that you spend, write 6 or 7 pages just on the text
before your sermon,
every sermon. But you get quicker at it as you go along.
Right. So then we've got Creeds and Confessions in the spring of our first year. I had Dr. Arend and Dr. Kolb did the other section for my class as well. Then we've got Intro to Pastoral Ministry, kind of on the practical side. That was a great class to kind of just sit and learn and kind of just discuss real practical issues. And then we did Pastor and Church and Mission. That was a phenomenal class. Only 7 weeks though, but you get a lot packed into that 7-week course, especially when it comes to missions and just hearing the stories from I had Dr. Prieto, and just hearing the stories from when he was in Brazil or even down in Texas, just hearing those stories of missional outreach is just I loved it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then as a first year, you do get into an intro to homiletics, Pom 1, whatever you want to call it.
Yep. Which is?
Preaching.
Yeah.
And you do actually have to do an exegetical study for your sermon.
Yep.
I didn't like doing it, but I did it. Kind of learn, different sermon structures, how to, preach it. I had Dr. Schmidt, and I think Dr. Nasker did the same thing this past year. You are not allowed to preach with notes.
Yep.
And it really internalizes the manuscript for you.
Yeah.
And it actually gives you a little more life into the sermon as well as you're preaching it, because now you're not constantly staring down at a manuscript trying to figure out where you are. You know this. You know your stuff, and you can actually be a little more animated and kind of be a little more free-flowing with it.
Well, I never actually externalized this out verbally, but as a student, when you got a million things going on and you have to preach for your class and you're being judged harshly by your classmates, I say that jokingly, but it's true. But also, everybody just wants to see you do a good job.
Right.
But to stop and take time to memorize a sermon, as I've grown as a preacher, the thing that I've come to appreciate that most, I don't write every sermon that I preach, but when I do write one, don't take the manuscript into the pulpit. If there's something about what I've written that I can't remember and I skip past it, it obviously wasn't worth preaching anyway. So that's what I find really valuable about that process.
So you basically, in this intro to preaching course, you basically start from doing all the mining of the original sources and stuff, coming up with an idea, all the way to you actually preach a sermon to your professor and your classmates, and that's when you're not allowed to use notes.
That is correct.
I've taught a lot of sections of that course as well, and I'm happy to say that I also do not allow students to use notes. And I always tell students, don't worry, you will survive this. I've never seen anybody spontaneously combust while they were. I've seen 1 or 2 people get fairly close.
Right.
There's nothing worse than knowing where you're going and then not knowing where you're going.
Yeah.
And everybody's looking at you. But there's only one way to get over that. It's just to do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
And all the guys that I ever taught, and I don't know, I've probably taught 10 or so sections of that class, they all figured out a way to keep going.
Yep.
And they talked about Jesus, and they said amen at the end. None of them got fired from seminary or flunked or anything like that. So.
That happened to me in Haupt 1. I got through my introduction and then
froze.
What's next? And it felt like I was standing there for 20 minutes. And then, of course, Dr. Schmidt, who was my Haupt 1 professor, he's recording it so you can listen back to it. In real life, it was 20 seconds, maybe, but it felt like an eternity. And then I kind of know, and that's the practice of sermon prep.
Right.
If I don't write a manuscript, there's a mountain of notes somewhere in the outline of exactly how I want to go. So if I'm not thinking about the words I put on the paper, the direction matters. And that's again, it's just a practice, and you get faster and faster at it. But stop being in class again. I was the last person as well.
Oh.
I can't remember how I ended up being last to sign up, but I was the very last person to go. So everybody else is gone. Everybody else is carefree, and here I am standing in the pulpit for an eternity while everybody waits for me to say something else.
And the only person that remembers that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and now everybody listening to it. And of course, Dr. Schmidt, he doesn't forget anything, man. I guarantee you he remembers it.
You're probably right.
He, like, when I preach in chapel, he's like, oh, good. Is Micah going to pause again? Yeah.
Just sit back.
Yeah. Exactly.
Might have a little extra time.
I know where he sits in chapel.
Meditate upon the word.
I'm not even joking. I know where he sits in chapel. When
yeah.
I'm preaching, I try very hard not to look where he's sitting.
Yeah.
You can't help it. His
Right.
gaze is
Right.
is pulling you to him.
Right.
You can't help but go over there. But I try not to linger because Anyway, and I say all this out of true love. He is.
Yeah. Well, and it's because he's so good at preaching.
What? And he cares so much about your preaching as well, not to criticize you. He wants to help you be a great preacher. And of course, the standard, he's the guy of our generations. He's remarkable. If you're listening, if you've never listened to David Schmidt preach, go on to our website, find where our sermons are, and click on any one of them.
Yeah.
And it'll be one of the greatest sermons you've ever heard in your life.
Yep.
So then we've got, let's see, what am I missing here? I think that was it for first year.
Probably some history in there, I imagine. No?
Just the first year was
intro to
just
history.
Just intro to history. I've got Reformation history here in the spring.
Nice.
So kind of moving into the fall of your second year, you still have an exegetical course, but now it's Old Testament rather than New Testament, since by this point I was one of the lucky few that got to take summer Hebrew this summer and get through it. So now that you know the Hebrew language, or at least enough to at least write an exegetical paper on it, and kind of use the tools at hand to work through the original text. Your Old Testament courses are prophets or Torah. They're 7-week courses, so half of us were in prophets first, and then switched to Torah, and then kind of vice versa. We have Systematics 1. Dr. Aaron and Dr. Maxwell are teaching Systems 1 for my class this year. I absolutely enjoy systems classes. They're great. We kind of put it this way the other day. Really what systems classes are, it's okay, let's talk about this and let's kind of apply it into a real life situation. Let's work through this. This is what I've been thinking. Let's apply it and work through it in real life.
Yeah.
We've got Worship in the Word, which is another practical class, which is kind of more on, I don't want to say logistics of the divine service, but it's kind of going into kind of history of liturgy, our liturgy, how it fits in to our service, presiding over the service, doing.
Yeah, there's some how-to, right?
Right.
And we've heard from people out in the church, like, this is really important. We can't overlook that everybody just knows how to lead God's people in God serving us in this holy setting, divine service. So it takes you through where to stand, where to face, all the appropriate terminology for all the different vessels
and the why.
Right.
The why.
Really important. Yeah.
Right.
I feel like that was like a systems class when I was a student, and if it was, I just personally, I think it's great that it's a practical class. Well, anyway.
Yeah, there's always been a worship class, but I don't remember what
department
it was in.
I really do feel like it was a systems class back in the day, but I mean, again, all the different departments, they all have to come together.
Right.
But anyway.
Do we still use Invited Guests by Tim Maschke? Or what's the main text for Worship in the Word?
So we use Arthur Just.
Okay.
And then we've also got the Companion to the Services from CPH. There's a lot of good information in that. I think we could have done a book report on invited guests.
Okay.
But I chose to do Just instead.
Sure. Tim Maschke was my theology prof in undergrad, so I got the early version of that book as a class way back in the day. So, yeah, invited guests. Good. Always like to talk about a few books that people might be looking for a book recommendation. So Worship in the Word. Anything else?
We've got coming here up in the spring. We've got Pastoral Care and Counseling.
Yep.
Kind of a big class. I've got Teaching the Faith right now. We're absolutely loving Teaching the Faith.
Yeah.
This year, so that's always been good. A lot of good discussions come out of that. A lot of good group work, group activity. Really kind of giving us that practical aspect to teaching, because not all of us have that teaching background. So,
Sure. Yeah.
And then I've got Reading and Preaching here in the spring, which is, you pair a practical guy up with an exegete and kind of go over Old Testament text, how to preach it. Just makes for a good class. So I've heard good things about that class as well. My elective, my first year, was Devotional Life with Dr. Schmidt. So there was a time where I had Dr. Schmidt 5 days a week. Because he used his preaching lab almost every single Wednesday, which,
Wow.
when you're there, you're like, okay, I really don't want to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning, on a day that, I don't have to be up. But it in the long run, it made for, it was well worth it.
Yeah.
Even
Nice.
now, any moment you can get one of these guys to stop in the quad. I don't miss the opportunity, just even for 10 minutes. There's just such a treasure of knowledge, experience, and again, talent when you don't want to, if you get up and you put in that little extra time to get into the mind of one of the professors and hear how they're doing what they do. It only makes you sharper. And again, your parish, your vicarage congregation will appreciate it because, every once in a while, like I'll go in, I have a vicarage folder on my Mac, and I'll look at sermons from the front end of my vicarage and compare it to sermons on the back end of my vicarage. I don't dwell for too long on either side of that because even at the end, you're not great, but the growth,
Right.
Yeah.
from time to time, it's just, they'll appreciate if you are a little better on the front end and they don't have to listen to your dribble until you get warm and comfortable preaching to them. But yeah, it's good stuff.
So social cultural.
Yeah.
What does that mean? The social cultural. It sounds almost like a psychology term or something.
I kind of put it as, party planning committee, and, social cultural chair just sounds better.
Yeah.
It,
It's the refined seminary way of
Right.
saying party planning
And-
committee.
Yeah.
planning parties is a big part of it, but it's also, making, getting everyone together, to enjoy fellowship, just have that sense of community, just because, as an example, the married and families are out in the woods on one side of campus, single guys are over in ISO on one side of campus. So if you can find an event where you can bring them both together, you don't have that divide between married and single students, which is always going to be, kind of there. But that's why I was very grateful that we were able to do cookouts on Friday during the summer.
Yeah.
Out in the woods, we'd get the grills going about 4:30, 5 o'clock. We'd have, burgers, hot dogs from Costco. Everyone brings a dish to pass, sidewise. We have refreshments, and it's there to not only relax after a long week of class, because 9 times out of 10 you're there for an intensive during the summer, and that's 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, and it can be a lot. So you need time to decompress. But it's also a good spot to build those relationships where you may not be able to in a classroom setting.
Yep.
Some of the guys that I talked to in my class that were married, I didn't necessarily have classes with them, but I was able to see them on a Friday night and go, hey, how's life? How are the kids? Just check in. And that's kind of my goal for this year is really keeping on in that good sense of community that we do have here on campus, whether that between students, faculty, what have you, but really this is a community. There is growth to be had, and we can talk about our faith.
Yep, absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about some of these parties. So you mentioned the barbecues that happen on Friday night. So that's kind of impromptu potluck. So what other kind of parties do you plan?
So the big ones that we've got going throughout the year are Oktoberfest, which I think went off without a hitch
very,
this year.
very well.
Yes.
Always happens in September.
Right.
That's just how we do it as Germans. I don't know why.
I wanted it the next weekend, but
that's how they do it in Germany too.
I know.
It's the end of September, Oktoberfest.
Then it's Prof and Steins, which are once a month on Fridays. Various topics. We've got coming up this Friday, Dr. Bodie will be talking about the exorcism.
What's the exorcism?
So the exorcism, based on the book and on the movie, there was a connection to Concordia Seminary kind of before the book and the movie kind of picked up the story.
Right.
So Dr. Bodie, our resident expert, will be talking about kind of the Concordia Seminary portion of the story. So I'm really excited. It should be a good hour.
Filled with all kinds of urban legends.
Yes.
I sometimes when we're on tours, I'll sometimes take people to various places where there's at least some urban legend of where it happened. But this Friday night we will hear the official version.
Right.
So not all Profensteins are this kind of historical lesson.
No.
What's the typical program for a Profenstein?
So the Profenstein typically will be, we usually get together about 4:30. We'll have refreshments, a little socializing time, and then that prof will take the soapbox at 5 o'clock and talk on a topic. What we did in September was kind of best advice from your time out in the parish. Good illustrations, bad illustrations, and like a sermon, children's message. I got Dr. Lewis to talk about time-traveling Jesus.
Yes.
And
typically, it's meant to be a little tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
Some entertainment value, a little bit silly. I think one of the topics that I spoke on one time was stories you can't tell at a church potluck. And I told some stories that I wouldn't have told at the church potluck. So, yeah, it's fun. And it's just a time for, there's profs, there's students, there's staff, and it's just a time to hang out. So we've Oktoberfest, Profenstein, barbecues, anything else?
Springfest.
Springfest, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Which is just the spring version of Oktoberfest.
Right.
That's in April this year, I believe.
Okay.
If I remember right. So kind of the same thing. We all get together, have a lot of food, have a lot of refreshments, just, time to hang out, relax.
Yeah.
Start thinking about vicarage, placements, call day.
Yep.
And Jambalaya Fest, are you a part of Jambalaya Fest planning, or does the church down in New Orleans take care of all that?
They take care of a good portion of it. I kind of helped with getting the beer.
Yep.
For Jambalaya Fest, but that's always a lot of fun when they come up, and I mean, it's always great food too.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is
It's
my favorite fest that we have every year.
I don't know if they've done it for probably at least 10 years, because it seems like they've been doing
For a
Jambalaya
long
Fest
time.
since I was here.
It was when I was a student, it was a thing, and it used to be, I think, for concluding students, but then sometime
Right, it started
during,
out as an admissions thing.
yeah, and then sometime towards the end of my seminary, it became like a whole campus thing, which
Yep.
it's just better that. I mean, starting it off, if there's limited supplies and you can only feed so many people, and you're doing this gracious thing for guys that are getting ready to go out on their call, nothing wrong with that. But the fact that they do it for our campus,
Yeah, it's awesome.
and they come up and they throw it down. I mean, again, we've had the next youth gathering is in New Orleans.
That's
and
right.
From where I'm sitting, it's never in a better place for the food alone.
Well, we could talk about the party planning committee at Concordia
Always.
Seminary for a long time, because there's a lot of great community that happens, and just Christian fellowship that happens around breaking bread and just enjoying one another's company. But time marches on, so we should get to some ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree.
Sure.
Here's my first one.
Put on the specs.
Ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree. Reading glasses.
It's right for the picking.
Okay.
I've had contacts or glasses since I was in 4th grade, and I ran into a situation last year at my Fieldbrook church where even with my contacts in, I'm like, I can't really read this anymore. And then kind of later, I realized I think I was sitting at the organ, I was struggling to see the notes. I'm like, well, I guess it's time for me to get reading glasses.
There you go. Yep.
Welcome to the 30s.
Ripe for the picking. They're I have to have them. I went for sushi several months ago with the team, and I couldn't read the menu. It was embarrassing, and I was like, got to get me some glasses. I leave them everywhere. But they're not
I'm the same
bifocals, and I'm pretty quickly getting to the place where, I mean, if I wear these and look out at people, then it's really blurry. So my vision far is good, but my problem is just that I leave my reading glasses everywhere. So
Yeah, they're right for me. I'm not on a very strong strength, and I can't, like, it's not that I can't see things, but it's getting to the point now to where in order to read fine print or stare at a computer screen all day, the eye strain is really tough.
Yep.
And at first I thought, it's like the whole thing, just put on some blue light glasses. And I got 0 strength blue light glasses. I was like, this actually doesn't help. Yeah. And with reading for graduate school, it's required, and it's distinguished. You look smart if you wear glasses. I've learned it's like having a British accent, but you don't have to say anything, so nobody actually knows if you're smart or not. So yeah, it's right for me. Cool. All right. More importantly, right for the picking, leave it on the tree. Laffy Taffy.
Ooh, it's right for the picking.
All right.
That was a candy I grew up on, but it was also, those were some good jokes on those.
Listen.
Oh man, the jokes.
What do storm clouds wear under their trousers? Thunderwear.
See, it was right there. It was right there.
It's one of my favorite ones. It's like probably the only one I can remember.
Are there good jokes though? Oh man, Laffy Taffy for me is ripe for the picking. Although,
is there a flavor you're about to isolate?
Yeah,
I knew it. It's controversial. Come on, spit it out.
All right, so the one that I love and the one that I hate.
Yeah.
So ripe for the picking.
Apple.
No.
No.
Strawberry is
the best.
Strawberry Laffy Taffy is the best.
Okay.
And banana is kind of abhorrent.
Okay.
I'll
It's
agree with
so
that.
fake. It's so fake
Yeah.
and just disgusting.
Fake
Banana taste is awful.
I almost said banana Laffy Taffy because that's like
yeah, it's the same
it's
as
more
banana runts. Have you ever had banana runts?
Yeah, of course.
These are awful.
Yeah.
Absolutely awful.
I don't hate them, but it is a completely artificial flavor. It tastes nothing like a banana. I remember back in my chemistry days in the organic chemistry lab, we had to synthesize banana oil, and if you could see how it was made, you wouldn't eat anything banana flavored.
man.
So like from like raw materials to banana oil. And but this was the worst part. We had to this is all chemistry labs at that level are take really long. And now we're way off topic, but I'll just share it anyway.
So gross.
So imagine spending 5 hours synthesizing this oil where you have it connected to it's called a reflux still, where like it goes up, but it condenses and goes back down.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, 5 hours of this, and I go to take it off and I drop it. And so then I have to kind of use the stored banana oil, and even though I had to mark it was stored, I still got taken off grades because it wasn't. Not only are you getting graded on your method, but like the purity of it. It's like, but it's not anyway. Chemistry is not fair, man. So yeah, let's leave it on the tree for me too. Now that I've told that story, banana flavored stuff, it's not worth it. Not worth the process.
All right, I have another candy one.
Oh,
Ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree. Mentos.
For me, that's leave it on the tree. I'm not a big fan of Mentos. Never have been. It's just they were never around, and I'd rather do like a Tic Tac or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm all about Tic Tacs, especially white Tic Tacs. Those are my absolute love.
what flavor is that? Is that spearmint? No, those are green.
Yeah,
Wintergreen?
white is like
No, that's like even more green.
peppermint or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, but Mentos. After you've seen these demonstrations where you put a Mento in the Coke thing, like I'm terrified of that now. I don't want that in my stomach, right? You have Mentos and then you forget and you take a sip of Coke, like you might explode. I think that's a bad idea.
Anyway, I mean, see, this is after I tell this whole long chemistry story, you come up with this fallacious nonsense.
So let's leave it on the tree for me.
I mean, it's interesting. I don't seek out Mentos, but they are the fresh maker according to the commercials.
The fresh maker.
So I don't not like Mentos, and in fact, the fruit flavor ones are just yummy. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just kind of They're like Laffy Taffy, but bad.
sure. I mean, again, it's not something I seek out, so I don't know. I mean, I can't sit on the fence because I don't let other people do it. It's not something that I have. Although I will say, when I buy gum, I'll get like Trident, but Dorothy will get like the Mentos gum.
I didn't know they had gum.
I didn't know
So
that.
I don't seek it
I
out. So
thought
I'll leave it on the
Mentos
tree.
were all
but,
made in like the 1980s, and
and
they
they
just keep putting them out.
the same supply
Yeah.
from there.
Right.
It's not impossible.
They made way too many, and they're just sitting there.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, there
You
we
got
go.
one more for us?
Let me scroll down to the
You want
bottom.
me to go?
Oh, no. Oh. Yeah. Because this one's kind of right for the pick and leave it on the tree. It's the season. Hayrides.
They're right for the picking.
All right.
They were a fun part of my childhood. Not too far from where my grandparents were, they actually had a pumpkin patch. We used to do hayrides there all the time, and it's a good fall activity.
Yeah. I wasn't sure what I would think about it right when you said it, but you talked me into it. It is ripe for the picking. It was a great part of my childhood. I haven't been on a hayride in a really long time, but yeah, it's just kind of fun. You're sitting around with a bunch of people, and yeah, fall is so much better than summer in every way. So yeah, ripe for the picking.
Can't go to the swimming pool. Anyway, all right. I just did a hayride at Shaw Park. There's some kind of thing that, well, anyway, I've asked Dorothy that this be the last year we go to it because our kids are too old for the thing that we went to. But it's leaving on the tree for me.
Well, in Shaw Park, I mean,
and see,
that
but see,
doesn't
here's the
feel
thing.
like
But I don't have the nostalgia because
Yeah.
I've never grown up in a place like
Right.
so. We'll go out to like Eckert's Farm. It's not really a hayride, but you get on a
Yeah,
cart that's pulled
yeah.
by a tractor. And I did hayrides when I was a kid, but like I've never lived in that setting.
Yeah,
I'm just a city slicker, and so I do things like that all for my kids, not because I enjoy it.
Yeah, when my
No shame over here.
When my uncle would take us on hay rides in the hay wagon,
It's probably exciting.
and it
Yeah.
was awesome.
Could be a little reckless when it's when your uncle, but when it's some guy
Right.
slowly pulling this tractor through Shaw Park, it's kind of lame.
All right, last one for me. Ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree. artificial intelligence, as in like Chat GPT, large language models?
For me, it's leave it on the tree just because I don't know a whole lot about it.
Yeah,
I
fair.
would have to do a little bit of research on it to kind of have an opinion either way.
I had to do this 2-hour-long talk, 2 sections, 1 hour each, for pastors on artificial intelligence and preaching in Pacific Southwest District, and I learned so much about artificial intelligence. I love playing around with it. I've learned what it's good at and some things that it's absolutely awful at.
Yeah.
But it's ripe for the picking for me. We just talked in our faculty meeting today about what should we think about artificial intelligence, and there was some good discussion.
You asked this when we had a flame on, I think.
I did?
Yeah, and the only reason why I remember, because I was like looking through, I was like, what haven't I asked? And I'm not trying to be like, oh, Ben's recycling. At some point, they're all going to be recycled.
I didn't even know I was recycling, so that might not count as recycling.
No. Well, it's just one of these things where, like, back then, it was like, leave it on the tree just because, and it wasn't
like,
even
what
too
is
long
it?
ago,
Right.
but it's just not something I've really interacted with. And I haven't done a ton with, but it is one of those things where if you use it in reasonable applications, it can,
Right.
it's not necessarily a terrible way to get feedback on a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
It just depends on what you're looking for. I was just having this conversation with somebody, and he was like, oh man, like, he's like, you're a verbal processor. And to some extent I am, but only if I'm looking for feedback. And so, like, I would rather have this conversation with somebody if we're talking about things as opposed to emailing back and forth, because there's not a lot of context. And that's the only thing I don't like about AI.
Don't
is
worry,
the context.
they'll get the voice and all of that, like, layer on top of all this in very quickly, and we'll be talking to robots. Maybe that'll be our next guest on Under the Fig Tree.
I use Speechify so much, and that's what I'm saying. Like, which is a heavy AI program, and it's just
we're
there's
all
so
using
many
AI
advantages.
even if we don't know it.
Yeah. All right. Well, last one for me, and this is a recycled one. I know it is. I don't know how Ben feels about it, but it's still good to talk about. Right for the pick and leave it on the tree. Pork rinds.
You know, it's leave it on the tree.
Okay.
Again, it's not something I grew up with. It's not, something we had in the house, and not really my cup of tea.
Fair.
So I think that if we recycle ones now, we actually, I think that the next episode, you actually have to bring it and so that I can try it.
Oh.
So
bang bang. It's tomorrow, right?
I'm game for trying pork rinds, and I'll leave it as a question mark until you bring me a pork rind to try.
I'm gonna try to make. What do I have in the morning? I think I have time.
And if it's not the very next episode, but viewers will have to wait for my.
And now
answer.
they're like, "Wait, you guys record episodes back-to-back days?" Sorry, guys.
Back to back.
I'm gonna try to remember to bring some pork rinds. I mean, they're very ripe for the picking for me. Like
some
Dorothy,
good ones.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Like.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I don't want to like just go to anywhere.
It might just be that I'm not picking the right pork rinds.
It's very possible because some of the ones, the texture's off. Texture is so it's kind of a texture food. Yeah. I mean, the flavor isn't incredible. Let me not lie about it, but the flavor's not bad.
Are we talking barbecue?
So I don't do the seasoned ones. And
okay.
The reason why is because typically for seasoned ones, for me, they put way too much on a pork rind. And if it's in a bag, the way it's processed, all you're doing is getting a mouthful of seasoning. And then also the pork rinds are typically mush.
See, this is why you need to bring pork rinds, because I don't know anything about pork rinds.
I got you. Yeah.
I would, if I was going to pick something out, I would pick barbecue, but pick a good pork rind.
Actually, I'll order some, because there is there are different. There's just like everything. You get what you pay for. There's levels.
Yeah, let's get bougie with our pork rinds.
All right. I got you. I just want, I'll do that and see if I can sway you. And if you don't like it, you don't like it.
Yeah,
it's one of those things where if
open-minded.
you didn't grow up on it,
truly open.
And as you were saying that, Daniel Buckman, again, just photographic memories, the person who I asked first, but he's a Southern guy. I'm starting to wonder if this is north versus south kind of thing. And now I don't know. I don't know. Well, anyway, Luke, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on Under the Fig Tree. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing your stories, your life with us and our listeners. We like to close with this, a thought from you. If there was one piece of advice that you would give to anybody considering church work, becoming a seminary student, what would that one piece of advice be?
Listen to the call the first time. It all works out.
All right.
That's good advice.
Even if you listen to it a couple of years late, just keep listening and be open. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. It's when at some point we got to like bring all these together.
That would be fun.
And like have a montage of all the pieces of advice. I don't want to say you don't need to listen to Under the Fig Tree. Just listen to the last couple of minutes.
Maybe we could get our student worker to work on that. Dale's our producer sitting back there thinking, "Oh man, that sounds like a project." Great idea, Micah.
Listen to all these terrible episodes all over again and pick out the piece of advice. No, Dale's great for us. We definitely appreciate his work. Not for Dale. That wasn't a thing for Dale. But if you're listening and you know how to clip things out of YouTube, we would appreciate it. Yeah. Go back and listen to all the episodes again so we get some more listenership. But then make some clips for us. Well, again, Luke, thank you for joining us. I'm trying to keep a running list of students we have on, especially pre-vicarage ones. So I think we can have you back on after your vicarage. And
that'd be good.
See what your
Where are they now?
Yeah, exactly. some follow-up. Well, and if you're at home listening or driving in the car or whatever else, thank you for joining us. And if you yourself are listening and you kind of have that internal call and you need some discernment, guidance, and advice, fill out a request for information so we know how to contact you. We'll reach out to you, invite you onto campus to one of our events that we have throughout the year or for a personalized visit. Get a feel for the seminary campus. See if it is a place where you belong. And then also, if you're a listener and you kind of don't have that internal call, church work isn't for you, but you're looking around your home congregation and there's somebody that you've always thought would be a good teacher, deaconess, pastor, DCE, and the like, don't think about it. Make sure to tell them, because you could be that person that encourages them to take that next step, to reach out to us, and who knows, they could be your pastor in the future. As always, thank you for listening. We appreciate the time, and we'll see you next time under the Fig Tree. Take care.